and she's founder of the Silver Linings Educational Services. She's going to talk on the power of play in writing development, and her company is Silver Linings Educational Services. She is an educator and speech pathologist dedicated to supporting students with learning disabilities. Drawing from personal experience with dysgraphia and 25 years in literacy instruction, she empowers teachers through structured literacy training and innovative play-based approaches to writing, development, and student confidence. So I think today she's certainly covering a very, very good background, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome her here. So I think I'm just going to hand over to Diane. There might be a very, very few seconds before that happens. But I'm just going to fill the space for a couple of minutes by the look of it. Let me just... Right, Enid, sorry, I've been told that you are going to go through your own paperwork, so I'm going to leave you to it. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Hi, I couldn't get unmuted. Are we there? Am I with you?
Yeah.
Hello, Enid. Yes, you're fine.
Yes. Yes, you're
Okay.
fine. Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
Oh,
Enid.
no problem. I can't get the video on, but I was able to get unmuted, so thank you. All right. Well, I'm so happy and honored to be here today. Thank you so much, Maria, for that introduction. And I'll just go a little bit more into my background and how I ended up here passionate about dysgraphia. I graduated with both a bachelor's and a master's in speech pathology and audiology. And I started my career working with stroke patients, maximizing neuroplasticity and strengthening language and memory skills with adults. And that is when my passion for writing and the importance of writing for brain development and memory and all of that began. I spent 15 years in the public schools as a speech language pathologist. And during that time, I co-taught structured literacy in kindergarten through high school. I presented trainings for kindergarten teachers and reading teachers about phonological awareness and structured literacy. I was an RTI facilitator and I was an assistive technology evaluator for my district. And all of those things have really helped me in getting where I am today and understanding the needs of students at all grade levels. So first, I want to start with the benefits of writing by hand. There are so many benefits. I think we all know that writing by hand offers a variety of benefits across academic, mental health, cognitive, and memory domains. We often say that the brain remembers what the hand does. Students who take notes by hand tend to process information more deeply, leading to better comprehension and retention compared to when they type. Handwriting activates different parts of the brain compared to typing, promoting neural connections and cognitive development, especially in children, but in all humans. They've now come out with research that supports the idea that we can possibly slow down cognitive decline by creative writing. Writing by hand encourages critical thinking and synthesis of information as it requires more effort and engagement than typing. So it really helps students with focus, tuning out all the noise when they're able to use pen to page. Signs of dysgraphia. I'm sure this has been covered a little bit today, and I wanted to kind of go into some of the things that are affected because these are the things that I'll be addressing in terms of what we can do to help build strong language and writing skills. So there may be many difficulties, but obviously what shows up most often is letter formation and legibility. I always say dysgraphia is a difficult disability or difficulty because it's on display for everyone to see. And I know as someone who was dysgraphic in school and, is still dysgraphic, that it is a challenge and it really impacts our self-perception often on how we see ourselves and our ability, especially because it is on display for everyone to see. So letter size and spacing can be a challenge. Spelling is most definitely a challenge. And often we see students producing work that's much simpler than their ability to be able to communicate because they write what they can spell. Fine motor coordination is affected. The rate or speed of writing is affected. Some students, it's very laborious and it takes a long time for them to complete a writing task. Grammar can be affected. Overall composition and organization is often affected. And here's specific difficulties, often writing in a straight line, holding and controlling a writing tool, often writing letters in reverse. So that shows up a lot in the B's and the D's and the P's and the Q's, for instance, and having sometimes trouble recalling letter names, knowing when to use lowercase and uppercase, struggling to form written sentences with correct grammar and punctuation, omitting words. Sorry, I'm letting somebody in. Omitting words from sentences, the incorrect ordering of words and sentences, using verbs and pronouns incorrectly. These are all things that can show up in their writing. One thing I wanted to bring up is having one of these signs doesn't mean that a person has dysgraphia or, even just a few of these. And also here in the US, we see a disproportionate number of students with dysgraphia in my work because we're truly not prioritizing writing in literacy instruction. Most of my students who come to me between the ages of 8 and 18 write at around the first or second grade level. They have not had a lot of opportunity to work on it, to have explicit instruction and opportunities to practice. I've had teachers tell me before that they have to sneak writing in instruction after second grade, that really it's only worked on or emphasized until second grade. And then after that, it's not something that is focused on in terms of handwriting specifically, and writing in general. So we see older kids that just didn't get the foundational skills. Some of them are dysgraphic and some of them just present as dysgraphic these days. So there's definitely a disproportionate number right now that we're seeing in the schools. So along with it being on display for everyone to see, and for, you know, this difficulty that individuals with dysgraphia exhibit, it really affects motivation and learning. And we know that, you know, when something's difficult for us, it's not something that we maybe will want to continue to do. So for instance, I've always had a challenge riding a bike. One of my learning challenges is dyspraxia. And oops, am I writing on there? and so riding a bike has been difficult. I don't have to ride a bike, so that's okay. But I would avoid it at all costs, just as students who, you know, are having difficulty with writing will avoid writing tasks. Yet writing is a skill that we need throughout life, so it's not something we can avoid. Research in motivation, such as self-determination theory, suggests that people are more motivated when they find value in the task and feel a sense of autonomy and competence. Students may lack motivation for writing because they see it as a chore rather than a valuable skill. If they don't perceive writing as relevant, they will struggle with it. So this is something that we have to help them to develop that motivation to write. And so when we see success, it builds confidence. The more success they have, the more confidence, then the more motivated they are. Positive reinforcement creates a cycle of motivation where success leads to increased engagement and willingness to learn, ultimately enhancing overall educational experience. So for my students, I implement a positive reinforcement schedule where they receive like a token economy. They receive points that they get to add up towards a gift card. So for when they're very unmotivated, that's when I use the points towards the gift card. However, the more success that they feel, the more autonomy they feel, the more progress they see, the less they need the points towards the gift card as we go. And many of them even forget that we ever even did that. But it's a great way to start getting them motivated to do something they hate to do. It's also important for them to see what the goal is in the whole process of why we're working on these skills and what that's going to eventually lead them to. Okay, so stress impacts learning. Because children with I have dyslexia there, but this applies to dysgraphia. And I really believe that a lot of students with dyslexia also have difficulty with writing. They learn differently than the system teaches, so they experience repeated failure right when they begin school. So when a student is presented with traumatic stimuli, the only task they perceive any task they perceive they will fail, a student will go into flight, fight, or freeze mode for protection. So oftentimes educators will report that report to parents that their child is exhibiting negative behaviors when they might actually be protecting themselves from traumatic stimuli. So this can be presented in many different ways. Either they run, they flight, fight, or freeze. So they might react like by punching something or hitting something, or we just see that complete freeze. And now they've added fawn to the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. So I always say it's kind of like the deer in the headlights look when they get to something and they're just terrified, and it makes it very difficult for them to learn. So how students perform in school is not just about what they know. Anxiety and motivation can affect their ability to learn. And as early as kindergarten or first grade, they can start to feel stress about their learning. When we are afraid, our brain limits our ability to think for good reason. So when we think back to the dinosaur, we had to run from the dinosaur. Or for me, where I live in the US, we have bears. And so there's been times when I've been very close to a bear and feel the need to run. That fear emotion that you feel and when you feel threatened is often also how these students feel when they are presented with something they perceive they will fail. It causes a change in organ function or behavior. We get stressed or aggressive. Then we're left with 3 ways out: freeze, flight, or fight. Again, back to running away from an animal. When the brain thinks we are in danger, the part of our brain called the amygdala takes over to protect us and save our life, leaves us with only those 3 options, and critical and creative thinking is impossible or very, very difficult. High pressure triggers some response as a danger. So again, they perceive they're going to fail. It feels like a danger in a physiological response. When there are high levels of cortisol in the brain at the same time trying to obtain something in their memory, there is an increased chance that will not stay in their memory. They won't learn it or forget things they've already learned when they are required to recall it. This is a lot of times people will say to me, well, they had it one day and then they didn't have it the next. So most likely it has to do with the cortisol and the stress response. And oftentimes they're so stressed that they're not actually retaining it, even if it feels like they are, or like this describes, they just can't access it because they're in a state of stress. Anxiety affects, so as we've said, anxiety affects performance, brain power, and working memory. So oftentimes they're not able to hold as much in their working memory if they're stressed. Anxiety might be preventing people from showing what they actually know. So mindset can help with this. Mindset matters. Expectations can impact our ability to perform on a test. So as simple as saying, I'm going to fail this test will impact our ability to pass the test. Or if we say to ourselves, I've got this, I can do it, I know how to do this, we take deep breaths, we can actually also change how we would perform on the test based on how we think about it. So with my students, I love the idea of a growth mindset. And I don't do a lot with growth mindset. I know that for a while that was a big buzzword in education, and they put a lot of emphasis on growth mindset in different ways. But my favorite is when I'm talking to students or I'm assessing students and I'm asking them a lot of things that they might not know, and I don't want them to feel that stress that we just talked about, I'll say, I just want you to say, I don't know that yet. And it's amazing how much it really helps them to kind of shift their thinking. Like, this takes the stress off of, oh my gosh, I need to know that. And I just say, well, you don't know it yet, and we're gonna learn it, and then you'll know it, and everything's gonna be okay. And so that, I really feel like it helps. I see a whole shift in their body language when they say, I don't know that yet, or I don't know it yet. So I wanted to share a perspective from one of my students that I'm working with in terms of this idea of stress and growth mindset. This is a 10th grade student, and I asked her to share her experience because I'm often told by people or presented with the idea from people that there's a certain stopping point when we can't work with kids anymore on handwriting or writing, when we have to just rely on assistive technology and give up the idea that we can help them continue to learn to write, especially handwriting. So because of all of the countless benefits of cognitive benefits, mental health benefits, memory benefits, I feel it's really important that all students are able to write and that they at least can read their own handwriting so that they can reap the benefits. So she shares, I'm in 10th grade and I've been working with Enid to help improve my writing. She helps me write my letters and clap out syllables and words so I can hear and feel the rhythm when I spell. When it comes to writing, she focuses a lot on repetition, giving me visual cues to remember the right direction of each letter, which no one ever really taught me before. Repeating the letters with my hand helps my brain start to remember on its own. When I write sentences, Enid reminds me about punctuation and directionality, and sometimes she has me write the same sentence several times. It really helps me remember. Even though writing by hand is harder than using voice to text, it helps me slow my thoughts down and get them on paper. I've noticed I'm not as slow as I used to be, and writing feels clearer and more natural now. Enid has helped me so much with not just writing, but confidence too, because the confidence in the writing and the ability to be able to do something that was difficult before really, really improves confidence. So this was a student who back in first, second grade, they decided that writing was too difficult for her. So they just put her on speech to text. And this happens so often. And it's one of those things where we overuse assistive technology with individuals who struggle with writing. And as an assistive technology evaluator for my district, I gained a really strong understanding of this. So it's important that when they have things that are difficult for them, we don't take away all of the things that are difficult. So for instance, if a student is having a difficult time with spelling, organization, and handwriting, we're going to take away two of the things that are hard, but leave one of the things that's hard and work on that. So we may give them help or assistive technology with two of the three things until that thing is easy. And then we would do the same with the other things. And so we don't just remove everything that's hard and remove all opportunities to get better at it by giving them speech to text as a Band-Aid, or a crutch. We work on building the mastery of skills. And so while we do that, we assist the struggle with whatever we need to do to help them, but we're constantly building those mastery of skills so that they can be, keep up with their peers and be confident with their ability to be able to write. So then her mom also shared her perspective and going into what she's been through. And she said through targeted multisensory approach, clapping out syllables, tracing and repeating letters, using visual direction cues, and practicing sentence construction, our child is beginning to restore that rhythm and internalize the mechanism of writing that we were never explicitly taught, or that were never explicitly taught in the classroom. She herself has said that voice to text feels easier. Enid's instruction, even though that feels easier, Enid's instruction helps my brain remember how to do it on its own. That simple statement captures what IDEA, that's our Individualized with Education Act for Special Ed, promises instruction that builds mastery and independence, not dependence on shortcuts. So again, we see too often that we give them the assistive technology without helping them build the skills. And we talk, this student and I talk a lot about the importance of writing, because I feel like students need to know the why we write, and so that they understand and want to be writers, are more motivated. So she talks about being a TV news producer. So she says, I know firsthand how critical strong writing skills is. It's always been central to my own work, and a critical need for my child's education. So again, up till now, she was not going to write, and they had sort of accepted that fact. But reliance on technology is not the answer. Voice to text may allow temporary access, but it does not teach and lead to mastery, independence, and self-sufficiency. So it's not just about academics in school, it's about functioning in a meaningful way in our daily life, independence, full potential, coming from mastering the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, so just really emphasizing that these skills are necessary for our daily life. And if we don't give them the opportunities to practice and the explicit instruction, they might just be relying on technology for their lives. And it's been really great to see this progress with this student. It's only been a month, and she's already feeling very confident with her handwriting, and pretty soon we'll be able to, a month, and that's only 2 days a week. So we're ready to move on from handwriting now, but she's at a level where she can read her handwriting. It's legible for me and for her. So we're not going to make it perfect, but we definitely want to make sure that she feels confident in something that she can carry through her life. She's one of many students I work with in high school and middle school, and pretty much from third grade to high school, that all come to me at about the first grade level in writing, and we work on it. And many of them end up excelling in writing, including handwriting, and developing great confidence for it. So assistive technology should be a tool, not a crutch, and not the solution to the difficulty. So assistive technology is about assisting the struggle, not replacing mastery of skills. So we must be mastering the skills, the foundational skills that they need to be able to be successful in writing. When we talk about older kids and writing, I always say intervention must build foundational skills. So no matter the age, I know a lot of times I hear individuals talking about the fact that once they're in middle school or high school, I read a lot of articles about this, that they we just work on comprehension strategies, that we just kind of throw the rest of the foundational skills out the window and focus on compensation strategies and things like comprehension strategies, and then compensating for what they don't have. No matter the age, the intervention is the same, but the delivery is different. So with different materials and different games, we have to know our audience. So for the older kids, they will shut down if something feels babyish or they feel not capable. So we want to build in confidence by giving them tasks that they can be capable of doing, that they can feel success at. And then while working on the harder things, we need to start with the things that we know they can be successful at. So explicit instruction for mastery of foundational skills is crucial. So I have a concept, an analogy for my students to help them understand why we have to go back to the things that may feel babyish, may feel like they should have learned in kindergarten. And so I created a Jenga tower to help understand the concept of foundational skills and what happens if we don't have those foundational skills. So as you can see, if the whole tower has all of the skills on all the sides, but this just gives a little snapshot of, maybe phoneme segmentation is one of the skills at the beginning. Short vowel, long vowel knowledge. I'm blown away all the time. I receive students who are in middle school, high school, that still don't have any concept of truly what a short vowel or long vowel is. And, obviously it's very difficult to apply spelling rules if we don't have long vowel and short vowel knowledge. So all of these things are important, including verb tenses and parts of speech, all the syntax, morphology, and semantics that are all part of structured literacy. And if they have too many holes at the bottom, their Jenga tower will fall. So just like their learning is not strong, like a Jenga tower, if they have too many holes. So when we look at the Jenga tower, it's all of the components of structured literacy. Structured literacy instruction is beneficial for students with dysgraphia, just like it's beneficial for students with dyslexia, for reading and writing. And truly, if we use a writing-focused approach for reading and writing, we see greater gains in reading comprehension, reading fluency, and writing. So my students have a learning journal and they write everything down. They write down the phonics rules, they write down parts of speech, they write down every single thing we're learning because of the principle that the brain remembers what the hand does. So these are all the areas that need to be addressed when we're working on writing. And so we start with phonological awareness. And I want to kind of touch on that in terms of, we don't need to be exposing kids to endless phonological awareness activities. What we need to be doing is assessing their phonological awareness skills and just targeting the skills that they're missing. So 90% of my students who come to me at the older ages that don't have the ability to be able to decode or encode multisyllabic words, they don't have syllable awareness. And that's probably the most common one I see in terms of affecting the ability to understand multisyllabic words. Every once in a while, we get a student who doesn't have concept of rhyming. And I know there's been some controversy or debate on whether rhyming awareness is important or not. And I believe that it's a very important building block in terms of it allows students to recognize the patterns of our language. And I use the Connects cubes, like the math cubes that we have that are different colors, to show them the patterns in the words. So for instance, that we have one color that changes at the beginning, but the other two colors don't change. And so they can see visually there's a pattern to rhyming, and then they understand the concept for when we're spelling. So then we can say, oh, if you can spell king, you can spell ring and sing and thing. And they start to be able to recognize those patterns. And then syllable awareness, we can always recognize when kids have difficulty with syllable awareness because they don't know that one syllable word is a one syllable word. So they'll start breaking a one syllable word into sounds instead of words. Instead of syllables. And so then you realize that they don't have the concept necessarily of sounds and syllables, that they're confused about all of it. So if we get a little bit deeper into syntax, semantics, and morphology, those are all also, just like phonological awareness, very important components of structured literacy that help expand and improve overall quality of writing, as well as the retention. So if we're working on a certain syntax skill or a semantic skill and they write it down, they're more likely to remember it. So understanding syntax helps students understand sentence structure, morphology. For instance, we change a noun to a verb to add ION, or we change a noun to an adjective when we add OUS. So this allows them to understand that concept. They first have to understand that the noun and the verb before they can apply those morphological rules like that. So it also helps them understand better what they read when they understand the structure of the language. Understanding morphological rules also improves spelling. Knowing the knowledge of morphemes aids in understanding spelling patterns and rules. Facilitates reading comprehension as it helps students grasp the meaning of complex words, and supports writing by helping students learn to use varied and precise language, enhancing their writing skills and expression. So it helps them to, maybe they're going to say, I'm not, they can use a prefix instead of using two words. They can change, add to their repertoire by understanding prefixes and suffixes. Strong grasp of semantic concepts not only improves the clarity and creativity of writing, but also deepens readers' understanding, making text more enjoyable and impactful. Familiarity with figurative language enriches writing by allowing more creative expression and vivid imagery. So that would be, using similes and metaphors and idioms and understanding what those are, but also understanding how they make our writing so much more interesting. Using synonyms can add variety and precision to writing. So just changing the words we use and making it more interesting. And understanding antonyms allows writers to explore contrasts. So it's just really important that we are working on all of these, as well as working on handwriting and spelling. And I like to start with parts of speech personally when I'm working with students, because I do feel like it's such a strong part of the foundation in terms of what I just talked about and how it affects spelling and everything, but also because students can always be successful. When we work on parts of speech, it's an easy one for them to grasp and then have fun with. What I have noticed is that they come to me and all of them can tell me rotely. I say, what is a noun? A noun is a person, place, or thing. Okay, now tell me a noun. That's a lot more difficult. So a lot of these students have rote knowledge of things, but not more, a strong grasp of the concept that we're working on. So when I work with nouns, I mean, some students, they can't think of any, even though they know it's a person, place, or thing. So I'll say, look up, what is that? Oh, it's a ceiling. What's to your right? It's a wall. Just for them, what do you see in front of you? What do you, anything, just to get them thinking about nouns are everything around them, basically. And I have them start with their very favorite noun. I say, go into your room. I work with students on the computer. So if they were at school, though, they could think of the thing that they love the most at home, and they could, and then you say, okay, I want you to write down your favorite noun. And so again, they're writing everything down. And then when they can't remember a noun again, I say, what was your favorite noun? And then that triggers that connection, that association to something that they know as a noun. And then they're able to think of many more nouns. Also, the ability to be able to categorize nouns is very helpful. So if you say, okay, tell me all the things that you can find in the ocean. Tell me all of the school nouns. Tell me things that you would find at the grocery store, things you might find at the zoo. And that helps them to start organizing their noun knowledge and helping them to recall the things they know in their lives. And then in terms of games, when I teach verbs, because again, they can tell me sometimes that a verb is an action, but even that is not common knowledge, even from some of my high school students, is that we play Simon Says. And it's funny because even for the high school students, it's the novelty. The novelty of playing Simon Says is helps them remember it. So I allow them to be Simon or me be Simon. And when I'm Simon, it's really not about getting them out. It's about them thinking of all the different actions or acting out all of the things that I say. And then when I say, what are the verbs, they're able to recall the things that they did. So, and then with adjectives, when we are learning adjectives, I have them pick a type of food that they want to describe. And then we use our five senses to describe the food. And so that helps them also to make that association with something when they're trying to make that connection to adjectives. Understanding, okay, so that's parts of speech, sorry. Okay, so that's where I start. They have success with that. They write in their learning journal the parts of speech. I have them generate lists of words, so 10 nouns, 10 verbs, 10 adjectives, and they do that until they've mastered the concept and they can quickly generate words on their lists. And this came from one of my mentors early on in my career. And she said to me, you know, students will retain the information better if they're generating the words and they're associating it to their own lives rather than us giving them a list of words. So that's been very helpful for me, and I think for my students as well. So I kind of already touched on syllable awareness. Again, it's necessary for decoding multisyllabic words. Students need endless practice. Oh, no, they don't need endless practice. Sorry, there's a typo there. With phonological awareness skills. So they need their skills to be targeted and based on the concept. And so when I teach syllables, I actually have the students take little paper plates and line them up in a line. And then they put dry Jello in the plates, and then we practice with our finger, where they practice with their finger, writing out each syllable on the plate. I found that this is a very great multisensory way to explore syllables, because they can literally pull the plate away and they can manipulate the syllables with the plates, and they understand the word parts easily that way. And usually I only have to do the Jello syllable lesson maybe 1 or 2 times. And after we write the syllables on the plates, we tap them. And so let's say the word is yesterday. So they would write in the first plate, yes, and then ter, and then day, and then we tap it, and then we clap it, because sometimes it's just hard for them to put all of those pieces together. Okay. So as I mentioned before, writing focused structured literacy is important for reading and writing. And so I have taken the California content standards, and I picked California because even though we are at the bottom statistically of education in US, our content standards are known for being some of the most rigorous content standards. So I went and took the California content standards for literacy for all the structured literacy skills, and I put them together in a document like this, where I start at kindergarten, and right now I'm all the way up to 3rd grade, and I'm going to be finishing 4th, 5th, and 6th. But what I wanted to show is how we can incorporate all of these structured literacy skills that I was talking about into writing activities. So I'm happy to share these slides with anyone who wants them. You can just email me, and I'll have my email at the end. And I will send you the link and it's kindergarten through 3rd grade is what I have right now. So just to kind of show an example. So for synonyms, they need to learn synonyms. So the task would be reinforce adjectives and synonyms, generate a list of adjectives and synonyms. So when we're generating a list, that's when I introduce synonyms, because it's a great time with adjectives to say, oh, so that's pretty. Can you think of another word that means the same thing as pretty? And then practice substituting one word for another in sentences. So breaking things down to just the sentence level. And then often we're also working more at the paragraph and writing level. I don't see any examples of that here so much, but again, I have 3 or 4 slides for each grade. So this is just an example of 2nd grade and 1st grade, all the different ways that we can incorporate structured literacy skills into writing. So contractions is an interesting one. We have contractions and we have possessives. And I'm amazed all the time about older students that I have that are confused about specifically contractions, because that's in a lot of the work the work they're exposed to, or the information they're exposed to, but also things like possessives and plurals, having a very difficult time understanding the difference between those, and when to put the the apostrophe, and when to understand that it has to do with the concept of plural. All right, so now let me see, I got a little smaller. I think it's extremely important to work on types of sentences with students. Explicitly teaching sentence types helps students understand the why and how of punctuation. This also improves reading fluency. So I have students often who come to me and I say, read for speed. They've been taught because they've been timed for fluency tests or that they've been given the message that they need to read quickly. And they don't have any concept of why there's periods and commas and exclamation marks or question marks. Once we introduce sentence types and have them practice with different sentence types, they are able to understand punctuation both in reading and writing at a much greater level. And I also don't have to remind them as much if they understand sentence type. So I will just say, do you have your punctuation, your capitalization? And they will be able to put whatever they know it to be based on understanding these concepts of sentence types. I do notice there's a typo on interrogative. And so I've left it there so I can have my students figure out what is missing in that sentence. And so that brings me back to parts of speech real quick, because proper nouns, if we expect students to be able to capitalize, and many times they have no concept of proper nouns. So once they understand proper nouns clearly, then they are able to very quickly and easily know when to capitalize things. So it's very helpful, like I said, those foundational syntax and skills to help them understand that. Okay. As in terms of writing sentences, it can be very difficult for students. Some have not really had any practice writing sentences. And I've noticed, especially with my older kids, they feel like there's like a certain recipe for how they write, a certain way they're supposed to write. And so it's more difficult for them to be more free in expressing themselves because they don't want to fail. It goes back to that stress response where they don't want it to be wrong. So I find in the beginning, when we're trying to get them to express themselves in their own way, that oftentimes it's helpful to use sentence starters. I love this adaptation of Song of Myself by Walt Whitman because it helps me get to know my students as they are also practicing sentences, and they really enjoy sharing about themselves. So we know that we retain things better if we can have an emotional connection and association to something we already know, especially something that we feel, we have a connection to. So I find that this is very helpful in terms of building their sentence skills while making them feel like they're expressing themselves and not just following a recipe. Oftentimes I use, just to kind of talk about organization, I work with a lot of art. We incorporate art, and I think of kind of art and play sort of as the same, because if for the kids who like art, it's a very reinforcing activity to engage with art. But anyway, so storyboards are a great way to do this. I was going to say, but if a student is intimidated by art, then they can just write words in the storyboard boxes. The kids who love art will be able to create beautiful pictures to help them remember what they want to write about. So this has been very helpful for getting students to organize their thoughts and also get sequencing in the correct order for stories or for just expressing themselves. Explicitly teaching handwriting and letter formation, line placement, and spacing is important. And so this came from Tara West, who I've just discovered from littlemindsnetwork.org. And she created this brilliant graphic. And what I love about this is that the green, red, and yellow. So it shows the students where to start and where to end. And working with OTs, occupational therapists over the years, I've realized how important it is for correct letter formation. And my daughter went through handwriting without tears. So just knowing that you start from the top and the bottom, especially with the B and the D, understanding that the B is a line first and then a bump or then a C. Some people say we do everything starting with the C. And then the D is actually the bump first and then the line. And this is important because students will not perceive the B and the D differently in terms of direction, because they recognize the B and the D in the object center of the brain as opposed to the letter center of the brain. And so if we have them correctly form the letters, then it's a muscle memory issue and not a visual issue. So they can recall the letter based on their muscle memory of practice. I've also found much success with students who have the reversals of B, D, P, and Q to have them use their big muscle memory to practice writing the letters. So they will go outside with sidewalk chalk, or in the shower with shaving cream, or on a cookie sheet. I'll have them use big muscle memory to be able to practice those letters. There's something that I'm not sure why it works, but it seems to be very effective in getting them to understand or getting that muscle memory for the way the letters are supposed to go. All right, so, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not running out of time, but anyway, I'll go through this. Discussing handwriting with older students, I often talk about how instead of thinking about, feeling intimidated or anything, to think about it like a go-kart track. And that we need, because I make them write on handwriting paper, and I don't want them to feel like it's babyish. So that's the handwriting paper that has the little dots in the middle. And I said, so instead of thinking about it as babyish writing lines, think about it like a go-kart track. So if you're on a go-kart track, it would be easy to veer off course if you didn't have boundaries. So when we write, we need those boundaries to serve as guides, ensuring that each letter is formed correctly and that words are neatly organized. So by following the lines, we can create clear, legible handwriting. And this really helps students to perceive the purpose of the handwriting paper. And it doesn't take very long before we are past the handwriting paper and they're feeling confident. All right, now I'm getting into the gamification. All right, gamification is the application of game design elements, principles in non-game context to enhance user engagement, motivation, and overall experience. By incorporating elements typically found in games, such as points, levels, badges, challenges, and rewards, gamification transforms mundane tasks into more engaging and enjoyable activities. So when we gamify, we have increased engagement by integrating game-like features into activities. They're more likely to participate and stay engaged. And the interactive elements make the task more dynamic and interesting. Reward systems, this is points, badges, rewards, or common incentives in gamification. These tangible acknowledgements of progress can boost motivation by providing users with a sense of accomplishment. One thing I've noticed is both with the reward system and the gamification, they become more focused on the rewards and the games rather than what they might think they'll fail at, removing that layer of stress. So gamified experiences can be tailored to individual preferences and skills. So for instance, for some kids, I will play Pictionary. They love Pictionary. The ones that can draw, the ones maybe that don't feel so strong about drawing do not enjoy Pictionary. Enhancing learning and skill development. So all of that is, it really helps them to learn more effectively. Novelties in learning are crucial in gamification because they capture learners' attention. And this is kind of like Simon Says, it's the novelty of Simon Says. Introducing competition, immediate feedback, and a sense of achievement, individuals can feel more motivated to complete the task, turning mundane activities into fun, rewarding experiences, which can boost productivity and overall satisfaction. So here are some of the games I use for, didn't I turn? No, I still can't turn my video on. I was going to hold one of them up, but Wheel of Fortune, I got that online. It's in a box and it's really great because it has a spinner so you can make up points. And also it helps use for reinforcing spelling and to assist in recognizing patterns. So when we're doing, just like Wheel of Fortune, I love it for, you can see certain patterns in the word and recognize words as they're being built. Same thing with Hangman. We use to reinforce spelling and assist in recognizing patterns. Pictionary, we can work on parts of speech, draw a noun, draw an adjective. Draw a verb. We can also practice spelling as we're drawing pictures. They don't feel like we're actually working on spelling when we are using Pictionary. Book It. I don't know if anyone knows Blookit.com, and that's one where it's a video game style, so that we're playing video games while we're practicing certain skills. Oh, same with Gimkit, except I spelled it wrong. It's GIMKIT. And so positive reinforcement and practice with skills. Akinator is a mind reading genie with 20 questions, great for reading practice and answering WH questions, also fun and reinforcing. And then also riddles and jokes are a very great way to work on just making it fun, and they can create some of their own. So we also use art a lot, and we'll use art like drawing the steps of drawing things, and that also is very encouraging for them. So there's a growing body of research that indicates learning is more effective when it's enjoyable and engaging. Here are a few studies that support that. So there's a lot of information out there about making things more fun. And then here's my contact information. If anyone wanted to reach out to me for the scope and sequence, the writing scope and sequence with structured literacy skills, or I have a ton of game ideas. So I just listed a few, but there's many, pretty much any game that you can play, you can incorporate into school activities or writing activities. I don't know if we have time for questions.
No, sorry, Enid, we haven't got any time. We've run out of time, I'm afraid. However,
I'm sorry.
I have to say that I've thoroughly enjoyed that. And I like the thing at some point when you actually say about reading, writing, and arithmetic, because of course that is so important, isn't it? And whatever any of us have said today, and no matter what way people teach, we always have to say we have to go back to the ABC at some point. It's just that sometimes, obviously, we do it far more for play or whatever. You're all using the Jenga bricks, which I think are brilliant. I've got a lot of ideas from that. So I would really enjoy that. And I like the program that you're using. And certainly reward systems are definitely one of the best ways of encouraging the children, isn't it? Children any age, really. So I would.
Did I get cut off before I went into the games?
No, you had all the games on.
Okay, good. I didn't know if I got to that point. I'm sorry I went long.
Yes, we had all the game names, Pictionary, and lots of others.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool.
But no, we definitely had those on, right down to your information at the end. Yeah, gym kit, booklets, all of those were on. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Enid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. I'm Val, and I'm supporting this event remotely. Just to let you know, I had a message from the speaker. She's re-entering the call because there was an issue allowing her as a co-host. So we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Okay, hello. Hopefully you all can hear me and see me. I am going to share my screen.
Hello, Kelly. Sorry, just
Hi, Maria.
we had a problem because we have to change the co-host over every time. So
Yes,
we had a
yes.
problem just
All
changing.
good. I think it worked out just fine this time.
Yeah. So
Okay.
anyway, I am delighted to introduce you as founder Handwriting Solutions. But of course, Kelly, you've certified handwriting specialist and founder of the company and providing global handwriting, reading and spelling interventions through individuals and engaging virtual programs, and quite often around the world, being that it can be done on Zoom, of course, or similar. But drawing on your personal occupational therapy background and personal experience as a parent as well, it gives you the overwhelming power and personal experience as a parent. And Kelly empowers educators and families with evidence-based strategies to support children with dysgraphia and related challenges. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kelly and let her get on with her work. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maria. And yeah, happy International Dysgraphia Awareness Day to everyone, whether you are attending this live, if you're your morning or your evening, or if you're catching the replay. I've been kind of watching the action on social media, and it's been really cool to see people get excited about this. And I saw one comment that said, what is there really to get excited about? Dysgraphia is really hard. And I was like, yeah, it is really hard, right? But we have to spread awareness and education so that it doesn't have to be as hard as it is. So with all of that said, yes, I am excited to share some red flags to look out for, whether you are a parent or an educator. I think it's always good to really understand those signs, particularly the signs that might surprise you. Again, whether they have a diagnosis or not. And then also 5 things that you can do right now to help. I like actionable, tangible strategies. So hopefully this will help. And I caught the last bit of Enid's presentation as well. So I think you'll see some consistency, which is lovely, because so much of her presentation, I'm just like nodding my head, like, yes, yes, absolutely. So let's get started. Hopefully my mouse will work. Okay. So again, Maria kind of introduced me a little bit, but I wanted to share a bit of a story with you all. And I'll try to make it brief because I know we have limited time, but I think it sets the stage for why I do what I do and just how the passion behind what I will share today. So picture 5.5 years ago, my child was in kindergarten, 2019. I am a pediatric occupational therapist. I have 6.5 years of training on that, plus another 5 years of practice, and then another couple of years of teaching in a university. And I could not figure out why my child was struggling in kindergarten. And it was like all of the pieces weren't clicking with her. And I was like, I'm an OT. Why can I not figure that? Like, why is this so hard? Her fine motor skills were fine. Her visual skills were through the roof. And yet she couldn't write a letter and she couldn't read CVC words. And I was baffled. And the school said, she's fine. Let's wait and see. Well, I didn't really like that. So the summer between kindergarten and first grade, I started tutoring with her and saw that some things were starting to click for her. Fall of first grade rolls around. The school is like, oh my gosh, something's not clicking with her. Like something's like going on. We think you need to do a psychological evaluation. You need to do OT, you need to do speech, you need to do. And then I started like, whoa, 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 whoa. Yes, I know something's going on. I brought it up to you guys like 6 months ago. But also like, that was a lot. That was a lot to take in. And again, I worked with speech therapists and I was an OT and I was like, I don't know that that's the answer either. Come to find out, she was diagnosed in, let's see, November of 2019 with dyslexia and dysgraphia. Let me be clear, I had never heard of dysgraphia before this, and I was a pediatric OT. I had never heard of it, which means I used that research oriented brain and deep dove every single piece of research, book, course, training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to piece it together. Full circle, she's in 6th grade this year, or 7th grade. In 6th grade, we redid her psychological evaluation. She no longer qualifies for dyslexia or dysgraphia. Something tells me there that early intervention and intensive remediation might be the trick, right? Anyway, all that to say, that's my story. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm passionate about this. So let's dive in. I will keep this part short. Normally we spend a lot more time on this, and I don't know that the chat maybe it is active actually. Type in the chat if you're here live and you can have access to the chat. If not, that's okay too. It's still a great opportunity and a great activity. So I want you to use your non-dominant hand, and I want you to copy the figures on this page, but don't start yet. While you are copying, I'm going to be explaining something to you. So I'm going to be describing a little story. And then we'll chat about what happened. So you're copying your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, your left hand, vice versa. If I wanted to make this extra crazy, I would say go grab a mitten or a glove or a oven mitt or something, but I'm sure that may not be accessible. Okay, go ahead and begin copying. Did you know that reading is a complex process? The key stages of phonological development are word awareness, onset and rhyme, syllable awareness, rhyme and alliteration, and phonemic awareness. At each stage of phonological development, a child develops specific phonemic awareness skills. Phonemic awareness skills include phoneme, segmentation, blending and splitting, rhyming and alliteration, comparing and contrasting, and manipulation, and includes the ability to notice, to think about, and to work with sound units in spoken words. Okay, are you finished copying? Again, if you have access to the chat, hop in there. I try to be very interactive with these sessions because I think that's how you get the most. So if you're finished, hop in the chat, tell me you're done. How did that feel? Let's think about how that felt to write with your non-dominant hand, some really crazy figures that we're not used to, like the reversed S and the reversed 4. What did that feel like? Oftentimes I hear from parents, I do this activity with parents at times or with therapists or with other educators. I hear them say frustrated. I hear them say overwhelmed. That was hard. It's so hard. Yeah. Who heard what I was talking about? Usually people say, I didn't hear a word you were talking about, or something about phonemic awareness, because it was also very technical verbiage and terminology. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard to process auditory input with your hand that's maybe not as automatic as your dominant hand. Yeah, you were able to copy and you heard something about phonemic awareness. Yeah. So this is just a very snippet of what it feels like to have dysgraphia. I don't have dysgraphia, so it was really important for me to just understand that emotional piece of it, to understand the reality of how challenging it is for a lot of students who have dysgraphia. So I think this is always an eye-opening experience for you to just very briefly experience what a classroom would really be like, because they're trying to listen to the teacher, but oh my gosh, this is so hard, and this is awkward, and this is uncomfortable, and I forget how to form the letters, and I don't know how to to do that. And then yeah, you can't concentrate on what I'm saying. You miss out on so much information that the teacher is sharing, and that's where our kids are. So with that said, I want you to walk away today with, again, some red flags. We're going to talk about some myths that go along with those red flags and just understanding dysgraphia in general, and then 5 things that you can do right away to support your child or your students. So there's the obvious messy handwriting, right? Like, I can't tell you how many parents have shown me their child's paper and have said, does this look like dysgraphia to you? I'm like, oh, if only it was that easy. And I'm not a diagnostician, so I will also not claim to be an expert on that. But what I will say is that it is important to see the holistic picture, because dysgraphia presents itself very differently in a variety of students and adults. So yes, illegible output can be a red flag. It certainly was from my child, coupled with the reading part as well. Academic concerns. So they're just getting graded poorly on assignments because maybe the teacher can't read their writing. 2 of the biggest red flags that I want you to leave with today and keep just in the back of your mind at all times when you're working with students or children, avoidance of writing and frustration with writing. If I see a child or a teenager who are avoiding writing or experience frustration with writing, I've got to wonder what's going on. There's got to be a barrier there. And so we've got to figure that out, whether it is dysgraphia or whether there's something else going on. Huge, huge, huge red flag. Difficulty keeping their words on the line. So lots of floating or sinking, inconsistent sizing of their letters. Maybe they write really large or too small, or a variety of size like this sample here. Poor spelling can be a red flag for dysgraphia. And that's one that sometimes we forget about because, again, we think output. We think, well, is it messy? Is it illegible? But spelling is one of those that kind of overlaps a bit with dyslexia. So again, that holistic profile of their learning and how they learn and how their brain is wired is so important to really tease apart what's going on and what possible challenges they might be having. At times, a student may experience an awkward pencil grasp. Again, if they have an awkward pencil grasp, it doesn't mean they have dysgraphia, but these are just common symptoms, if you will. Irregular formation of letters, poor spacing with letters or words. So maybe they're all crammed together and you can't see where one starts and the other one stops. Or they're all spaced out. Difficulty translating thoughts to paper. This was also a big one. And this is something that maybe we don't always catch early on, but those older students, those students that make it to late elementary to middle school, and then it kind of starts, being a bit more obvious. The expectations get higher. And then there's this mismatch of their verbal skills are high, and yet you put a piece of paper in front of them and it all falls apart, or they get one sentence out. During our assessment process at Handwriting Solutions, we really like to look at this handwriting at different levels. So in isolation, with a visual, without a visual, and then self-generated thoughts. And that's a doozy for a lot of the kids because you give them a blank paper and you're like, you get to write about whatever you want to write about. And then it's like, whoop. And so obviously we give them prompts if they need prompts, and we make note they needed a lot of prompting. But yeah, those kids that just have a hard time getting their thoughts out onto paper. Difficulty with sentence skills. So maybe their grammar, their punctuation, capitalization, syntax, all of that is definitely a red flag. And then fatigue and discomfort with writing. So it's just uncomfortable. It's awkward. I hear students say it just feels awkward or weird. So that's certainly a red flag too. So we know that it is more than just messy handwriting. So I hear this one a lot too. What's the difference? What's the difference in just struggling with handwriting versus getting a diagnosis of dysgraphia? Because handwriting difficulties does not always mean dysgraphia. So I could spend the whole session talking about the DSM, diagnostic criteria and all of that. What I will say is, number one, there's not a gold standard for dysgraphia diagnoses. Number two, it's not very clear because every institution uses different verbiage. Sometimes it's called specific learning disability in written expression, and some institutions use dysgraphia. So it can be a little bit tricky to understand the diagnosis. But what I will tell you, it is not lack of quality instruction. In this day and age, that's a tricky one. And that's one that we try to tease apart for our families that we work with, because I want to see how they respond to really good quality instruction before I send them to a psychological professional for a diagnosis. Because sometimes it's just not. Sometimes, we get these pandemic kiddos who just weren't in school for 2 years and never had good quality instruction. Sometimes we get students that handwriting curriculum was removed during those foundational years. And so they just learn to draw letters instead of write them in a specific formation. So lack of quality instruction does not mean dysgraphia. It's not a motor disorder like cerebral palsy. It's not an intellectual disorder. And I do a lot of advocating for families on this because sometimes the intelligence is lost if written output is tricky. And we know the research shows that these kids are average to high IQ. And yet maybe their grades don't reflect that. And therefore that frustration comes in. So it's not an intellectual disorder. And that's also why that learning profile and that holistic view is so important to really see all areas. One thing we look at when we look at kiddos that come our way is if they have had a psychological evaluation, I want to look at working memory. I want to look at processing speed. I want to see what else is going on, big picture things. And then dysgraphia is not vision or hearing impairment, meaning visual acuity. They literally can't see the words on the paper or the hearing impairment. So we know that what it's not. So some challenges, again, I mentioned the confusion over diagnostic criteria. Just not clear, and there's not a gold standard of assessment process. Misunderstanding of what it actually is. Again, it's not just messy handwriting. Various nomenclature. So again, the SLD versus dysgraphia versus developmental coordination disorder. Also, if you do have, we know that the comorbidity is high. If a child has dysgraphia, they're more likely to have another learning difference or ADHD or some other neurological difference. So teasing those apart and figuring out what is impacting what part of their learning. Limited education. Again, I will be the first to admit, like I said, I had never heard of dysgraphia when my child was diagnosed. And I have a master's degree in OT, and it's like, how did that happen? So the lack of education, I hear from teachers all the time that they had never heard of it, that they were never really trained on how to help or what to look for or when to refer. Professionals, the general public. I think that's why, days like today, this awareness is so important because we have to get this information out there. And then all of the myths that surround handwriting, which can just confuse people, and then they just end up not knowing where to go for help. So let's bust some of those myths. My favorite, handwriting is dead. We've got tech, we've got AI. I think Enid mentioned the overuse or over reliance on tech. So I cannot tell you how many schools that I have seen that a child gets a dysgraphia diagnosis. Boom, you get a keyboard, a laptop. And I'm like, well, does the kid know how to type? Oh, well, no, they've never had typing instruction either. Okay, because that's a really hard motor skill as well. So they probably won't be more efficient or effective using just a keyboard. So that's a whole other thing. But we know the science is very, very clear in this, that writing by hand, there's so many benefits. I'm probably preaching to the choir today on this, but the written composition, the written expression, the spelling is improved, the retention, the brain, neurological firing in the brain of writing by hand versus keyboarding. So it's not dead, it's not going anywhere. If anything, I've seen a bit of a resurgence just in, in my millennial generation. And I also have heard from college students too, of how there's almost a pendulum swing of like, gosh, we're tired of the screens. Like we need a minute. I've seen some schools pull back on it too, which I think is wonderful. Let's pull back a little bit on the tech. Let's go old school because we know that the science is there to support that. One of my other favorites is my kid is too old to improve. Well, that's absurd because we have 70 and 80-year-olds who maybe have a stroke. Are we just going to say, oh, sorry? No, they're doing rehab. They're doing therapy. They're learning how to write again. If they can learn how to write again, surely our middle schooler, I get so frustrated when I hear, "Oh, well, our school said if they're not writing, by third grade, these habits are ingrained and they're stuck with them." No, so many of my peers in OT school changed their pencil grip once they learned like that. They're like, oh, this is no wonder my hand hurts all the time when I'm writing. And of course you're writing a ton in college. And so yes, it is 100% possible. It is certainly, there are challenges, of course, when you do have some ingrained habits. I think about those students that write bottom up or whatever. You pick your battles, you pick what's most important, you focus on one thing at a time. But absolutely it is never too late to improve or to, this should be like my bumper sticker. It's never too late to remediate. So there you go. Copyright. No, kidding. But, number 3 of a myth, legibility equals intelligence. Well, we just know that that is not true. And that oftentimes, like I said, we've got several students who are off the chart. I've seen their reports and their FSIQ is insanely high, and yet they're like failing several of their classes that are heavy writing. That's where we can pull the tech in, right? And bridge that gap for them so that they can show their knowledge. But we also know that it is certainly not a lack of intelligence. Number 4, handwriting is just fine motor. I do a lot of education with specifically our therapist out there on, and I think you see this more so in like school systems where there's therapists in school systems and they're brought on maybe to work with a student with dysgraphia, and they look at their fine motor skills and their fine motor skills are fine. And so they're fine. And so they don't think they need skilled therapy or skilled intervention. And we just know the handwriting is so much more. It is so much more than fine motor. We know that there's cognitive skills, language skills, visual skills, gross motor skills, our tummy muscles, our shoulder muscles, that handwriting is so complex, and we just can't think, oh, it's just the hand. That's the hand's, issue. I think the demonstration we did at the beginning was very evident in that. And then number 5, trust that the school will teach handwriting. And this one might ruffle some feathers, and that's okay, because we just can't trust right now that the school will teach handwriting and that they will support our kids. And I'm working diligently to change that. We sat in on our clients of ours IEP meetings, if you're in the States, or actually internationally as well. We just sat in on one with a student who was in the Dominican Republic. We just can't trust that they're going to give the level of intervention and instruction that these kiddos need. I'm hoping that I will not have to say that next year or the year after. But it's tricky. It's tricky right now. So what you can do to help. Number 1, be aware. I mean, that's what this day is all about. If we can just have that greater awareness of the child, of the student, monitoring their development, seeing if there is just like something that's not sticking or something that they're just not making progress like that we expect them to make, that awareness will only serve that child. Because then we know, oh, okay, this is what's going on, or, ooh, we need to explore this or dig into this area and see why that's hard for the student. So that overall awareness, note when progress is not happening, when it's slower, when it's not grade appropriate, it's going to be huge. And I don't care if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a therapist, or a private tutor, whoever, just that awareness is huge. What I like to share oftentimes with parents or people who are kind of newer to the handwriting piece is like, well, how, like, what do I know? When should I get worried, kind of thing. So this is just a nice little chart that we created to share with our parents to really help them understand how handwriting skills develop, and those pre-writing strokes. So, sometimes we see those 3-year-olds that are being forced to write, and then that backfires in a few years, of course. So we want to be very developmentally appropriate when we are serving these kiddos. But one thing I want to point out here is I did not leave our friend cursive out. So I'm a huge fan of joined writing and instructing students with dysgraphia in this, because it can be a few reasons why. Number 1, the research. Always go back to the evidence. Dr. Berninger and others have shared that writing in cursive can actually, it can improve outcomes in spelling and written composition. For me, anecdotally, I've also seen it just be a refreshing start, because some kids are so just over print when they come to me. And so, we might work on that initially, but we might say, you know what, I think you might need a minute there, and we'll come back to it. But let's just introduce something fresh. Let's build those motor pathways from the beginning. And of course, I am always a fan of having the school bring cursive into their curriculum as well, beyond just a few months in your 3rd grade year. Ideally, I would like to see that carried over for several years so that they become fluent in it, and so that they can incorporate that in any of their work through middle school and high school and beyond. Number 2, build their foundations. So writing is the tip of the iceberg. So what we see, that output, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I want to know where that lagging skill is beneath the iceberg and how we can help. That's, again, why we want that holistic learning profile, because I can just easily look at a child and say, oh, okay, yep, that paper, or I'll look at the paper and say, yeah, obviously you can't, your line awareness is tricky, but like, why? Why is that tricky? Is it tricky because of a visual, perceptual understanding? Or is it tricky because their cognitive load was so heavy that they couldn't even pay attention to what was line, that their words were written on? So we got to figure out executive function skills. That's a huge piece to handwriting. Core, attention, all of that. So again, here's another great little graphic that you can feel free to take a picture of the tip of the iceberg, what we see on the outside, and then those hidden skills underneath. And what we do at Handwriting Solutions anyway is kind of come at it from all angles. So from top down, from the iceberg, and then also building up some of those foundational skills as well. But wow, that's a lot, right? And that's just the beginning. Then we can go in and break each of these parts down too of attention. Well, what kind of attention? Joint attention in the classroom, in a busy setting versus not. You know, there's just micro skills that are built into that, but it is such a complex task. Number 3, multi-sensory learning. That is probably like our magic. That's what we do, because again, kids are coming to us with frustration, with avoidance. We've had a couple of students who literally have trauma from writing, and they're seeing a therapist for that because of maybe the approach that they had been around. I need to bridge that gap for them. I need to make writing more enjoyable, but in a very evidence-based way. So we pull in lots of multisensory rather than rote, repetitive. Again, there is repetition involved. You know, obviously the chalkboard, the dry erase board, there's pieces of that repetition, but it's not so mundane. So we can bring in, engage all of those senses: sight, touch, smell, taste, sound, movement. I know Enid alluded to those big body movements of writing with giant sidewalk chalk outside, or the air writing. That's great. And that works because it stimulates that proprioceptive sense that my body is in space. And this is what that feels like from a bigger performance or a bigger movement. And also a lower stakes movement. So I think that's a big one too. This is low stakes because they can erase that, right? Like in 1 second, it's gone. So if they mess up, and if they're kiddo that's a little bit critical of themselves, which was my child, it's just so much more lower stakes and so much more engaging and fun. When we get that motivation and that buy-in, then we've got them. We can get them to a better place. But we can't have multisensory without quality practice. So I think sometimes people get that confused and think, oh, so you're just like never practicing writing? Oh, we're practicing writing. We're practicing handwriting, and we're doing it in a very fun multisensory way, but we're still getting this quality practice. We might have to start by modeling for them what that looks like, or having them model it by just building with wiki sticks or pipe cleaners or Play-Doh or whatever, because that's the level that they need right then. And then that imitation is great, and then copying. So I love moving through this pathway of basically your scaffolding, right? You're giving them tons of support all the way to that independent. We're not just going to start, a student is not going to come our way and we're not going to go straight to copying or to independence. We're going to scaffold, we're going to give them supports, and then we're going to fade those away when they're ready. And that really leads to better outcomes. And here's why we do that. So again, you can see the cognitive load significantly increases. And this is also why writing is so hard. So we're going to start with that tracing, or that writing from imitation. So I do, they do. And when I say tracing, I can't say tracing without sharing this piece. I'm not talking about those dotted lines, because for a child that struggles visually, the dotted dashed tracing pages, we're not doing those. I mean tracing maybe with some shaded lines, or those little bubble pages that you have to keep your line within the boundary. Also noting starting point, letter stroke direction. The science is very clear that that is the most effective way. Moving to copying from near points, that's like at their desk, to copying from far points, so that might be up from the classroom board. to being able to write from what I tell them to write, and then being able to write their own generated thoughts. And then number 5, get outside help. When writing gets so frustrating and your child is avoiding it, their confidence is impacted. And the science is very clear that the self-esteem issues and the confidence issues that these kiddos have is real. And again, that's why that early intervention piece, I think, makes a big difference. That bridging the gap and providing them appropriate accommodations, but also we can't forget that remediation piece. So definitely seek out professional help. Don't trust or wait if you can. So let's recap. You can spot the red flags, you've busted some major myths, and then you've also learned some new tools for your toolbox. Because the reality is, and I know this is a lot of words on one slide, but I could not leave them out. 98% of school-based OT practitioners say that handwriting is the most common reason that they get referrals. 98%. Guys, I think we have a bit of a handwriting issue going on, whether they have the diagnosis or not, because again, we know the diagnostic struggles can be tricky. 10 to 30% of school-age children are affected by handwriting difficulties. This number is very vague because we don't have solid research on who actually has that diagnosis of dysgraphia. Over half of a child's day is occupied with writing tasks. Over half of a child's day, guys. And if they are struggling with it, that is not a fun day. And then you're going to see behaviors and avoidance. 30 to 60% of classroom time is spent in fine motor activities, mostly handwriting. Again, behavior is not always behavior. What's underlying? Children with handwriting struggles are often overlooked as their poor handwriting is seen as a character flaw rather than a real diagnosis. Let that one sink in for a bit. That came straight out of a research article. So, ick. I don't like that. I don't want my child seen as that. There's got to be a better way. Explicitly teaching how to write letters is just simply not a priority in a lot of schools these days. And so if your child has dysgraphia, it's real tricky if they're not even instructing on it. So what do you do next? I wanted to share a workshop series that we're running this week. It's made specifically for parents because I know there's not a lot of support out there for parents. So take a picture of this QR code and I hope to see you guys there for that. Otherwise, if we have time for Q&A, I will open it up. I also do free consultations. So I am a big believer, again, in getting this information out. I want it in the hands of as many people as possible. There's my email. There's our website as well. And I am happy. I will hop in the chat and see if anybody has any questions. Feel free, you can either type in the chat. I don't know if it will let you come off of mute or not, but certainly if it will let you, I am happy to take those questions live as well. Otherwise, please send me an email. Sign up for the free 15-minute consultation. I know that's usually more comfortable in a more one-on-one setting versus a group setting can kind of be a little intimidating. So
Hello, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure lots of people have got questions for you. I found it so interesting, and I loved your experiment at the beginning about the handwriting and things. I've seen lots of type experiments, but I haven't actually seen that type, and that was very interesting. So there was just so much there to learn. I'm going to have to go back when I have a rest next week or something and go back through all of these to see them again because there was so much to take in. So I thought
it's a lot, yeah.
I'm amazed by your figures, but although I have to say ours is probably the same. When you said 98% score called the OTs in for the children and 10 to 30% are saying that they're affected by handwriting, not necessarily dysgraphia, but by the handwriting. So I'm amazed by that, and I shall see if we can find some figures of our own. And I'm sure it'll be very, very similar. We usually are. But
Yeah, and I put some resources on there too. So definitely when you go back, you can see
I can pick it up, yes.
research. Yes, absolutely.
So-
I see some questions coming in too, if that's okay, if we have time.
We're a bit tight on time,
All
to
good.
be honest. We're late, and
All good.
I'm sorry about that. But
That's
if you put
okay.
it up, we'll email it to you.
Yeah,
Any
perfect.
questions, we'll email it. Okay, so thank you very much
Wonderful.
indeed for your talk.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. This question's going in now, but it's just too late, isn't it? Hey. Oh, I'm still on. Hello, sorry about that brief interruption there. I'd like to introduce Jennifer King. She is founder and president of Dysgraphia Life, and certainly takes many presentations around the world. She is a founder of Dysgraphia Life,